And thanks for joining us here on PM Express. And tonight it's the state of the nation that is in focus tonight on PM Express. We're going to be attempting to do a bit of a reality check with our own data from what the president had said. And then I'll get my guests to join me for a conversation. Isaac Adongo is joining me, representing the minority on the Finance Committee in Parliament. We'll also be joined by the Deputy Minister Trade Designate, Dr. Stephen Amwa will also join me, and then we'll have on Zoom joining us for a conversation now, Professor Godfred Bokping. We can actually go through the key issues that we are highlighting from the State of the Nation today, the reality check conversation. I'm going to run through this because there are a few things I want to pay attention. One of the things we always want to do for you on PM Express is just not to reproduce what duty bearers have said, but also, try and give you perspective and context. So let's go straight to that. What did the president say today that is important? One of the key things that the president has said today is the debt question. And the main thing the president was making today, and remember, the reason why we are in a crisis such as we are is because of the debt situation. Our debt burden is significantly higher and unsustainable. And if you look at the graph we've drawn for you, it shows you the trajectory, right? And we want to track back to, and you just focus on how steep the climb is between 2017, and 2020 currently, according to the Finance Ministry themselves. And if you come to 2017, the current president met a debt of 122 billion, and we're currently at 575.7 billion. That is more than 300% jump in the debt alone, and which is a significant one. And if you look at the gap in there, it is significantly huge, and that is a difference there. And if you look at before him, nobody before the president, before this current government, had accumulated so much debt. The graph speaks for itself. The Finance Ministry's data is what it is, and the president today made the point that he has borrowed. The evidence is clear, but he hasn't been reckless. That is a subject of a lot of controversy. How do you define reckless? It's one of the key things we'll get into very shortly here on PMX. Is also another key thing that we've been looking at in the comparative analysis, debt to GDP ratio, also plays out here. And if you look at the debt to GDP ratio as of November, it's 93%. But as we speak currently, everybody knows, even the finance minister had said that we are significantly above 100%, way above 100% to GDP. So this is unsustainable, as the evidence has shown there. And then you look at the COVID-19 expenditure that he laid forth in Parliament today. And one of the things the president said is that I can assure this House that nothing dishonorable was done with the COVID funds. And that's the president's assertion. But we know that the Auditor General has done his own audit and found a few things. I'm going to run through three key things the Auditor General found, and then you can come to a conclusion whether or not something dishonorable happened. One of the key things that the Auditor General found is that, that we paid a total of $607,000 out of a $4 million for the purchase of 26 ambulances that were never delivered. That's a question that is still hanging that needs to be resolved. We are hoping that the Public Accounts Committee, when they sit, will get closure to this. You can put your own, interpretation on this. Make of this what you will, whether or not it is a dishonorable conduct in the way we spend COVID-19 funds. And then the Auditor General makes a point that we also paid a total of significant amounts indeed by the Information Ministry to its own staff as COVID insurance, and paying 80 million. And that one was a key point, 80 million worth of vaccines by the government that was never delivered, among other things that was key also. And if you look at the external debt portfolio, and I told you the graph situation earlier, if you look at accumulation, when the president came in, a total number of loans that were taking, and as far as external debt is concerned, was 17 individual loans taking in 2018 alone, and that put us at 86 billion. If you broke this down systematically, right, based on the Finance Ministry calculations that we've done, this accumulation comes down to 82.7 billion. That's a significant amount. You see the various percentages year on year as the debts began to pile on, and is a fundamental reason why our economy is teetering on the brink of collapse as we speak currently. Now, a bit of the reality check also centers around some of the things the president said about the currency and inflation. And these are his pronouncements on the subject, and that the currency has been buffeted. That is a fact. Inflation rate has been very high. We know that for a fact. And so that is a reality, because the numbers are very obvious there. And in 3 years, it says government has reduced inflation to some 7.8% in January 2020, lowest since 1990. He's talking about what the past had been. His main point here is that before COVID struck, the economy was in good shape, right? And he paints a picture with the numbers that show the point. So they were at 7.8 in January 2020. That's a fact. For the first time in over 40 years, he says government had a fiscal deficit below 5%. Okay, but that is not the full story, I believe. And then he makes emphatically the point that to note that we are servicing, we are not only contracted during the period of the administration, the entire debt that was the servicing that I've been talking about, he says it's an accumulation of debt over the period. But what have we found? And I want to stress a bit on that when it comes to some of the key things that we found in this. The slides and moving. But one of the key things that we have found, as far as this is concerned, is that if you do the comparison, you would come to realization, for example, with the subject of the one district, one factory, that some of the numbers don't add up. When I sit down, I would raise those numbers back, and then we'll begin to ask a few of the questions about the reality check. Stay with me after this. My guest, Isaac Adongo, will sit down with me, and Stephen Amwa as well, and Professor Bokwe. Thank you. Join us after this. And thanks for staying with us on PM Express. Isaac Adongo is MP for Bogatanga Central and NDC member on the Finance Committee in Parliament. Stephen Amwa is his colleague on that same committee and is the MP for Nchai. So he's also the Deputy Minister Designate for Trade and Industry, and he's waiting for the Parliament to confirm his nomination. We'll be joined by Professor Godfrey Bokwe. He's an economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana.
Why do you call him Professor? You call him Stephen Amwa.
Dr. Stephen Amwa.
You give him a title.
Dr. Stephen Amwa. I think we are getting used. We
are right, because we all started
exactly.
Like,
so eventually we'll get used to you as Dr. Stephen Amwa. So Dr. Stephen Amwa, thank you for joining me. And
it's a big pleasure.
Mr. Adongo, I hope I'm not.
No, you're right.
It's okay. I want to be sure. Let me start with Mr. Adongo.
No, more than Professor.
I want to start. Give me your general verdict on what the president delivered today on the State of the Nation. It was supposed to be a State of the Nation. Did he reflect reality?
Well, to be honest with you, if you want to know the views of Ghanaians, I think the appropriate way to do it is to go out there and ask the people. I saw a president who is not with us. I saw a president who lives in a completely different world. And I saw a president who, for the first time, looked more humbling than I've ever seen him address the House. Because the reality is not looking well and it's not reflecting well on the government. So despite all the flowery language, beneath that is the reality that as a country, we are not in the right place and we are in a very difficult place. Evans, in managing an economy and in managing a country, the biggest fear, all the fears that anybody would have as in running an economy, we've met them. The first thing you do in running an economy is that your sovereignty is the most important asset that define the confidence and the trust of people in you, both local and international, said that they can give you their money and go to sleep and believe that they will have their money. Mm. When a country gets to a point where it simply cannot pay and has to take the unhonorable, decision to own up and say, look, we have mismanaged ourselves and we just cannot pay you. And that our sovereignty, which is basically our promise and our integrity that we gave you, is worth nothing. And that you are going to lose your money. That is the lowest ebb that any government would ever get to. And we are there, so we can't dig further. When you have a situation where an economy is running consistently negative real interest rates, what it means is that if you were to give your money to government and government were to pay you a certain interest rate as compensation, by the time you take the money, the inflation of the time would give you a negative position in terms of real value. That is a very difficult conversation to be had. When you manage an economy where the biggest player or stakeholder in dealing with unemployment, in providing sustainable jobs, in providing livelihoods, is the private sector. And the private sector must go out there and look for opportunities that deliver beyond 40% of margins so it can pay its cost of borrowing in order to stand a chance of managing the business. Then you are in a very difficult place. So we are in a place where, without missing words, the president would have wished that this conversation was not constitutional. But
so that he wouldn't have come to Parliament.
But it's obviously something he cannot avoid.
Okay, so your verdict is that it didn't reflect reality?
The reality is out there.
Or you're giving him credit that he actually still came and told the truth of where we are?
Because it was yes, it was actually a constitutional requirement, but he found a way to escape telling us the reality. And I sat there as a politician, and I felt that my image is further dented because politicians have been crafted as very people that you cannot trust. Our credibility is on the line. And you listen to the president look Ghanaians in the face and channel falsehood. I felt this was the lowest ebb. And I was asking myself whether I belong to this political class. And I really want to be part of this political class because my image has been dented already, and this has gone too far. Given what we know about our country, and given what we know about daily lives, I felt scandalized.
Okay, so you've mentioned the word falsehood. I'll come to interrogate that. What falsehoods are you referring to? Dr. Stephen Amwa, so that's the verdict of the Adong, and I guess it represents the minority view. What's your view?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity on your prestigious platform. My regards to our viewers this very evening, and we thank them, those who had the opportunity to be part of the whole process, the presentation of State of the Nation's address as required or demanded by the Constitution. I don't know, I think Article 64 or something, or thereabout. Evans, I am surprised, but at least for one good thing he said, that the president was very humble. If you are humble, you are not with us. If you are very outspoken, you speak with animation and with so much confidence. Hey, the man he had no respect, he's arrogant. So which is which? The president, in the first place, what I saw, demonstrated empathy. Because it wasn't something that he was like, oh, Ghana, I've done everything. Why are you complaining? You shouldn't know. He was very humble. It was an indicator of the fact that he combined humility and respect and empathy. That was the first thing, and was a sign to unify us as a house. I think the first time that the heckling that I have been always witnessing, in my opinion, was highly mitigated or minimized. Secondly, the president was very honest. He didn't say Ghana was heaven.
He didn't have a choice, did he?
He could have gone running.
How?
What choice? He spoke the truth. And he went further to even affirm the fact that this was global by stating what the IMF boss said, that Ghana was doing well till COVID and Russia came, which is a fact. You can argue and debate. There could have been other domestic factors, yes, but that is a fact. As I'm talking to you now, England, for the first time, 46 years now, Evans, prices of food and other items, relevant items, they've never seen inflationary rates just like that. Ambulances strike, nurses strike, teachers strike. No, teachers I'm not too sure, but magistrate court strike, aviation strike. Check all those things. To the extent that if you even have to be operated on, surgery, and you don't have money to do private insurance in UK today, Evans, it could take you between 1 year and 2 years. Check if I'm lying. I'm not comparing Ghana to UK, but the point I'm making is that we even depend on them, even the giant economies. So the fact that these factors are there, when my brother was talking, I'm surprised. I see debt exchange. It's very unfortunate, and we empathize with those who are going through this whole debt exchange stuff. But it happened in Uruguay, Greece, Jamaica, different countries. It's something called holdout. I'm not saying it's palatable, no, but it does happen sometimes. Holdout situation is where the issuer is not in a position to perform its obligation in terms of the rate and the maturity date. So what you have to do to even salvage the situation is to extend the maturity date and then replace the high bond ones with the low ones in terms of cost. And if you manage it well in the long term, the situation is reversed and the market yield more and they get more. It happens. Just that is not palatable. So we shouldn't talk as if something which had never happened. Evans, can I ask this question? Has there been in the history of this country that we have had impaired productivity for about 20 months? That people were asked not to go to work. And even when that was resumed, if you were 10, 5 will go, 5 will stay home. And they were all being paid. Have you had a situation where within the shortest possible time, world supply chain got so messed up that items that were costing $2,000, $4,000 jumped to $12,000 in this country?
So let's begin to interrogate the facts. And
I'm coming. I just want to end with this.
Yes.
So the point I'm making is that there is crisis.
Yes.
Anybody complains is right. But we can't take that away from the context of something that is unprecedented in our history. I've never seen that impaired productivity.
So let's interrogate the facts. Let's go to the facts. Your president spent quite a significant amount of time today, and you've repeated it, trying to tell us that this is not his fault. It's that it's Ukraine and a pandemic. You can compare ourselves to the other countries in the sub-region. All the countries
we are
in
not
the
doing
sub-region.
comparisons.
No, but I'm asking a question. All the countries in the sub-region face the same crisis. Mm-hmm. They face Ukraine, and they face Russia, and they face the pandemic as well. Some of the indicators, if we take inflation, for example, we are over 50%. No country in West Africa is close to that. If you take deficit, you take our closest neighbor, Ivory Coast, they are doing around a deficit about 10. We are well over that. Mm-hmm. You know that for a fact. So the facts suggest that whereas everybody else faced Ukraine and everybody else faced pandemic, the impact in Ghana has been far more felt. That certainly cannot be down to those two factors alone. The other factor that hasn't been said, it is arguably possibly the mismanagement that also accompanied it. So how do you explain the difference? How do you explain the difference between our indicators being completely an outlier to those in our sub-region?
In the first place, your statement is not completely true. Partly true because we have primary macro indicators. Some are better. If you want to go by this.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
And
let's do the factual. Which ones?
No, please. You've asked a question. Can you allow me to also?
Of course. But
explain?
You made a factual comment.
You were asking a question. You said very lengthy stuff. I waited. So just have patience with me. Then you come in. In the first place, it is totally wrong. I wasn't comparing Ghana to UK. I was making the point that even the giant economies, such as UK, US, and all of them, are having debt to GDP moving over 100%. Inflation rate post-COVID is about between 300 and 400%. You can calculate. UK was about 1.74. It jumped to about 10.1, 11.1. US was about 1.8. It jumped to about 8.9. These are facts. Yeah. I'm not comparing Ghana to them. It is wrong to compare one country to another country. That is why we talk about global, continental, like industries. It is totally unacceptable because you have different dynamics. Were they doing the same thing in terms of pro-poor policies? The same? Are we having the same issues in terms of what we outlay as a government?
The two factors
I'm coming. No, I'm coming. Have they
All
done the
the
same?
countries
Have they done the same length of roads? Have they built the same hospitals?
Us equally.
No, I'm coming. Have they done all the pro-poor policies we've done? Have they done that?
No, but the fundamental.
Can you also?
factors.
You don't have to debate.
No, I'm not debating.
Allow me to answer your question. What I'm saying is that.
But I just want to
There's
ask a fundamental question.
nowhere it will be right for you to compare just one country to another country. You talk about what happened.
But Doc,
Africa grew negative 2.0.
Dr. Amwa,
am I lying?
Dr. Amwa, the fundamental two factors the president used was what? Ukraine and the pandemic. No. Did all these countries the sub-region suffer the same fate? Of Ukraine?
Of course.
Yes.
But
so
okay.
If those are the only two factors the president put forward, how come other countries dealt with it better and yours is so bad?
You cannot do this to yourself and to your country. What I'm saying is, you cannot pick just one country and compare to another country. You can do continental performance. What about the fact that Africa grew that time negative 0.2. The world projection was negative 3.3, but Ghana grew 0.4. What about that? What about that? We inherited 3.4% GDP growth. It's higher today than that. Is it not true?
Yeah, it's because of COVID and
no, come on. Do you want to say it's COVID? I haven't said that.
No, I'm just debating the state of the nation.
You can't debate. You ask me a question.
No, we are talking about
exactly.
The state of the
so you are not debating me. So you are putting yourself.
I'm just trying to draw your attention to the fact that
what I'm saying is
we are talking about the state of the nation. You ask a lengthy
question. I'm telling you that anybody.
We are talking about two factors.
Can you allow me to speak?
And the pandemic.
Can you allow me to speak?
The president says
no. Can you allow me to speak?
Are the reasons why we are where we are.
But if that is what the president said, which I agree.
You agree?
No. Can you let me speak?
No, but I'm saying you agree with the president. But if you agree with the president,
can you let me speak?
But if you agree with the president, then you must answer the question.
But I'm answering the question.
Countries dealt with it
but
better?
Why Ghana is better than other countries in other parameters or with other parameters? Is that what you want to tell me? That is why you can talk about average. You talk about industry. You can say that the media industry, Joy FM has done this. So the industry's average become a benchmark. Because if you pick maybe Peace FM, they have other specific risk factors you don't have. So it's totally unacceptable. Anybody that does that without proper justification doesn't know what he's doing. I'm being honest with you, because you talk Peace FM, the number of staff might be different from yours. How much they pay for their gadgets might be different from yours. The money they use to procure might be debt financing with interest rate. Maybe your boss had his own money. But what we can do best in doing these things is the media industry performance. They use the average and say that it's 4%. Joy is doing 4 or 5. That is why you talk about Africa, you talk about the world. And the world averages and the continental averages are not exposing Ghana. Some of them, Ghana is doing so much well. Some Ghana is not doing well. But I'm saying that even the parameters we inherited today, with all the challenges we are having, some are far better.
Okay.
That is all that I want to say.
Stay with me.
So unless you tell me those countries you're talking about, in terms of the pro-poor policies they've rolled out, in terms of infrastructural programs they've done, in terms of their outlays and all stuff, they are the same as Ghana. I don't know, that would be very wrong to compare.
Stay with me, and we'll get Prof.
Totally wrong.
We'll get Prof to come in on that subject later. But I'll come to you, Mr. Adongo. You stated earlier there were falsehoods.
Yes, but first, when I say the president, it was humbling, it's not the same as being humble. Being humbled is not the same as being humble. It means that you've been brought down to reality. That's what we mean by you are being humbled. So that doesn't mean that you are humble. It means that traditionally you are arrogant, but the reality has made you to recheck and to reconsider your own utterances. That is one. Two, when you decide to compare averages, in 2016, do you know that Nigeria went into recession? Ghana didn't. Do you know that Angola was in recession? Ghana didn't. And yet we outperformed the Africa average by 3.6. And you keep referring to that and comparing to your average of your entire period.
What is it today?
What I'm saying is that
what's the GDP today?
You said I was quiet when we were talking.
Okay, you're right.
You were talking,
sure,
I was quiet.
Sure,
I disagreed. You see, you've been comparing average over 6 years with a terminal figure of 2016. Nobody does that. If you want to compare averages, then compare averages of John Mahama's era. And John Mahama did not do 3.6 every year till 2016. That is the first point that you need to understand. And I'm saying that when the global crisis hit the world in 2015, 2016, Nigeria went into recession, Angola went into recession, Congo went into recession, Ghana didn't go into recession and recorded 3.6% growth. So we need to understand that. Two, trying to ask us whether somebody is doing pro-poor and somebody is building the same number of roads. A prudent manager of the economy does not spend on pro-poor money that he doesn't have. You don't move your expenditure from 70 billion in 2019 to 205 billion in 2023.
But then there was COVID. That they had to spend.
So COVID was, you move from 70 billion to 105 billion, 100.5 billion, 30 billion, we agree. Are we still having COVID that you've moved from 100 billion to 205 billion?
But 2019, 2023, the only factor that has happened in the intervening period has been COVID.
And I'm explaining that to isolate COVID, you deal with 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, and you get a difference.
You get a difference, which is about 30 billion more.
Yeah. But that 30 billion is what the president is saying we spent on.
I'm explaining.
COVID.
So after that 30 billion, do you still have COVID in 2021, 2022, 2023? How come you did not eliminate the COVID expenditures and still filled in expenditures to cover the 30 billion when you didn't have COVID? To the extent that a poor, broke country has moved from 100 billion in 2020 to 205 billion. And you said that is not reckless? You double expenditure in 2-3 years when you cannot raise the revenue. And all you are doing is consistently go on the market and borrow 3 billion from the Eurobond market as if there is no tomorrow. That is the height of recklessness. But Evans, remember that in 2016, the economy is talking about did not take a penny from the Bank of Ghana. We are talking in excess of 90 billion borrowed from Bank of Ghana. You can't compare the two. In 2017, that economy that you inherited was enough for you to entirely finance your budget from domestic resources, except loans you drew down from the NEC. So we didn't go to European market in 2017. The entire financing of the budget was borrowed from the domestic market. That is the strength of that economy. An economy that was self-reliant, that allowed you to raise money domestically and fund the budget domestically. Said that for 2 years, 2017, 2018, you didn't have to go to the Bank of Ghana.
But that's an economy that was just still in an IMF program.
Yes, and so the IMF program is not a credit.
That they then managed to get it out of the program. And at that time in 2017 when it came, for example, one of the indicators, inflation was 12% plus. They moved it all the way down to 7.10% by 2019.
Okay, and where are we?
Well, of course, the president says you can attribute that problem to COVID.
Don't talk about what the president said.
We are 50. We are 50 above.
That's
yes,
what you know.
But yes, but
that's
above.
what you know.
Those are the facts. 50 above right now.
And that 12% also had global financial crisis. That certain countries went into recession. The global economy was generally in recession in 2015.
Did you have global?
Since 2015, you recall that in 2015, after the budget, the Minister for Finance, Honorable Setekwe, had a reason to come to Parliament to deliver an urgent policy statement. And that policy statement was to the effect that even before the budget took off, we were losing $700 million because of global crisis.
Yes, but are you comparing that to the pandemic?
I'm explaining to you that every government manages difficulties within the global.
But you concede that the pandemic is unprecedented, not compared to yes, they had an issue.
I'll not even come to that. I'm explaining that when you decide to compare your economy to the global economy, then it's appropriate to compare the economy that you inherited, that you are complaining, to the global situation. And 2016, the economy of Ghana was not being operated in isolation of the global economy. And large numbers of countries were in recession. In Africa, we had our biggest neighbor, Nigeria, in recession. Recession means that you recorded 2 consecutive negative growth in your GDP over 2 quarters.
Yeah.
We didn't. And we recorded 3.6%. And you are complaining, Nigeria would have taken that for anything. Angola would have been very proud. Congo would have been very proud. But we scaled above the Africa average. Do you get the point? And I'm saying that you don't manage an economy because you must deliver social services and you must build roads. You must do that within the confines of building sustainability. When we were in school and we were told that government debts are risk-free, it was that government consciously manages the parameters to ensure that it never defaults. Not to celebrate when it has defaulted and compel people to surrender their original positions for you to now go and say, I'm better off and I'm restoring the economy.
At the start, you mentioned, I want some facts on that. You said the president put forth some falsehood. Yeah. Can you drill down? What are these falsehoods? Because we challenge that.
One, is it the case that this government has constructed roads more than any other government?
Well, that's the president's claim.
Yeah, but you do believe it.
No, but I don't
and
have
the president himself exposed himself in the same statement when he said, the largest number of questions answered on the floor of Parliament were about roads. If roads were being built, why was the minister spending all his Fridays every day?
No, but Mr. Dogo, that doesn't follow.
I'm coming.
The president was emphasizing that when the roads are so important.
I'm making point. The point is that you spend so much on roads,
yes,
and you've delivered roads better than any government.
Yes.
And yet your minister, every Friday has a reason not to be in his office.
Yes. But what's the point there?
The point there is that because the roads are not being built, everybody has
it doesn't follow. I mean, so more questions are being asked.
Yeah. Why?
Only shows that it must be a government priority. That's the point the president was making.
Because if it was a government priority, it will be done, and I will not be asking him to come and explain why a road that is already constructed. I'm asking questions.
But you also know in the country like ours, which is very, very poor,
I've made our point.
So people will still ask for more.
Infrastructure is not built by math. It's built by allocation to capex.
Yes. But doesn't the budget show?
I'm explaining. So let me tell you.
Today he attached an appendix. Have you seen it?
Oh, let me finish my point.
No, but it's evidence. He attached the evidence.
You have it here?
No, well, I've seen it, and until you can come with contrary evidence, the president
come to contrary evidence to something I haven't seen.
Oh, but he attached it. He said it on the floor.
I'm looking at money. It is money that delivers what is in the book. Do you get a point? It is the money you spend that delivers what is in the book. And I'm explaining to you that tell me how in 2019 you spent 6 billion, which is less than 3% of GDP. And even your latest in 2022, you spent 16 billion, which is about 2.8, 2.9% of GDP. How is that a better record of expenditure in capex than somebody who did 4.5% of GDP? How is that a better record? Because you cannot pluck infrastructure from the moon. You spend money on them. And when the evidence is that you are not spending adequately on infrastructure, you cannot suddenly be conjuring them from the moon. You must have been spending money to deliver the infrastructure. Your record of expenditure on infrastructure, that's not only roads. That 6 million and 16 billion is for roads, is for water, is for education, is for healthcare, is for railways, is for everything infrastructure. So tell me how that generates transformational investment in infrastructure. How does that happen?
Can I come in, please?
How does that happen? Unless you're hiding something. So you cannot give me a book that speaks a different language from the money you are spending on the roads that you are depicting. How are you constructing them? So I am saying that is palpable falsehood. The man says that he's developed the biggest industrialization since the time of Nkrumah. Meanwhile, he's going around painting factories that are older than his government. Why? Kasaprep will really come to meet it. So you just go around painting people's businesses.
But if government facilitates a process under the policy of one district, one factory, definitely is part of
what facilitation? So it means that what? If
they create an enabling environment,
so the enabling environment is a Katapreko. You say the road to your factory is not good. I come and construct it.
That road that otherwise, without the policy,
And it is
would
the
have been a
reason
priority.
why we are not industrialized. The private sector will not go building a factory in Kulungugu because the president says so. You know it is a business case. And it's not as if government is going around spending money to build factories and industries. And that the government is relying on the private sector, which will take that decision anyway, to go and build a factory in Zebila to process onions. It is the reason there's no factory in Zebila. So I am saying that this hoodwinking of Ghanaians, that you've done the best irrigation, and which are the irrigation facilities you are mentioning? Pong, Tono, Tamni. I was personally present at Tamni when the sword was cut. And JM, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, was using the EDIF, now part of EXIM, to fund that project. How is that your project? The Ghana Commercial Agriculture Project, which JM secured $150 million, was to build the agriculture value chain, focusing on irrigation, warehousing, and to ensure that you got aggregators to become private investors in agriculture. So that delivered the warehouses. How is that Akufo-Addo's warehouses? That delivered Tono rehabilitation. How is that Akufo-Addo's Tono? That delivered Pong. How is that Akufo-Addo's project? That was supposed to deliver the Via irrigation project expansion. It was never done. So please, even in opposition, if you read the State of the Nation, the good stories are delivered by John Mahama. The good stories.
Well, he's here. I mean, I'll put that to him.
No, he should deny that we brought Ghana GCAP and we funded GCAP with $150 million. And it was to build the warehouses.
So stay with me, both gentlemen. I'll come back to you, and I know that I'm sure you make.
But I hope you give me a long
I'll give you time to respond. Let me go to Prof, because there's a lot of things that both of you have said, and I brought in him so that he can be the arbiter here and help us navigate through some of the numbers. Prof, thanks for connecting and joining us on PM Express. Let's start first with the very controversial subject of the president spending a lot of time today telling us that to understand the state, you need to understand the history and why we are where we are. And then he talks about COVID and Ukraine. I was making the point and asking Dr. Amwa that how does he square that circle where you have other countries in the SAP region all facing the same two twin challenges and managing it far better, as indicators show. He doesn't agree with the views as I put to him. Where do you stand on that subject? Is it fair to put the issues that we are currently facing down to the two issues, or there's more to it?
Right. Thank you, Evans. Good evening to our cherished viewers and the two honorable MPs. I think the president made some statements that we can identify with, that where we are is also contributed by COVID-19 and then Russia, Ukraine. That is a fact. We cannot agree with the president on the fact that it's solely as a result of COVID and then Russia, Ukraine. Normally, what happens is that
solely. He used that.
It will come to that. Please proceed. Please proceed. Yes.
Well, the IMF boss, what he said.
It takes global shocks like this to reveal the resilience of your economy. So we can use the same COVID-19 to explain what happened in the case of Ghana compared to our peers. So for instance, we were told that those with weak immune system were more vulnerable to the effect of COVID compared to those with better immune system. So economies that were better governed, well managed, had good policies, macroeconomic framework, had better growth trajectory, and all of that, were able to withstand those shocks much better than other countries. And that is where the variation you see. And therefore, the tendency to blame or to shift the blame largely to COVID and Russia, Ukraine, without attributing part of where we find ourselves to our own resilience of our economy, I think that is less charitable with the reality. I think we need to face that. Even before COVID came, we were not complying with the Fiscal Responsibility Act threshold of 5% of GDP when it comes to deficits. Okay, we were only complying with that because we were treating the financial sector cleanup and the energy sector indebtedness as outliers. If you put all of that together, our fiscal deficit 2018-2019 was actually more than 7%. Okay, and then COVID came. Now, when COVID came, Ghana's fiscal deficit was the largest in the sub-region. There is
as in before COVID or after COVID or during the COVID period?
Even before COVID. And with COVID, our fiscal deficit was the highest. There is scientific basis for doing comparison. We can look at Ghana relative to our regional peers within the sub-region. Okay, and within the sub-region, we can identify Côte d'Ivoire. There's nothing wrong with that. So we have regional peers, we have our structural peers, countries with similar economic characteristics as we have. So we can compare Ghana to Côte d'Ivoire because we have similar economic structures. There may be differences in policies, and that is what reflects differences in governance style and leadership. Okay, so somebody will pursue certain policies because they believe that that will build better resilient or a stronger economy, and that is the path they have chosen. But then again, so you look at that, then COVID came. Then you want to look at COVID effect and look at 2020 election, okay, and see how we overspent to win over the electorate. You can see the evidence. Then also, you want to look at Ghana's debt trajectory. The current challenges, as you rightly said, is debt-induced, okay? So as a medium debt-carrying country, where the present value of our debt-GDP ratio must not exceed 55%, right? And then also in terms of external debt servicing, relative to our revenue should not exceed 18%. Evans, we actually watch over this data for our debt to actually cross 100%. So we have borrowed to the extent that it's beyond what the economy will be able to sustain.
Let me read to you something. Let me read you something the president said on that. Quote, "Let me state emphatically that we have not been reckless in borrowing and spending." True or false?
That is false. And the reason I'm saying so is that we picked our debt to GDP ratio from 2017. But of course, when we talk about the public debt today, it's cumulative, right? But you can also see the marginality in terms of what this government has added and what they also inherited. The point that I'm making is that as a country with a debt management strategy, we were able to borrow and borrow and borrow to the point where we arrived at a situation where we cannot honor our present and future financial obligations as and when they fall due without asking for external help or without adjustment to our fiscal policy, financing, and in addition to debt restructuring. That cannot be prudent. The reason I'm saying that that cannot be prudent is that if these borrowed funds had been invested efficiently in the productive sectors of the economy, it would have enhanced the cash flow generation capacity of the economy. Then in that case, the economy would have expanded. And once your tax collection policy is effective, you would have generated a lot of revenue because your debt carrying capacity is a function of the growth of your economy. So we said that the most effective way to manage your debt is to grow your economy. Now you will see that the rate of GDP growth in the last couple of years relative to the rate of debt accumulation and the interest rate on the debt, and to the fact that we have not been able to manage our debt, our economy effectively, you see the depreciation of the cedi manifesting explicitly in debt formation. So if you put all these things together, you could not say that we have been prudent with our borrowing, because essentially what the IMF, joint IMF World Bank debt sustainability analysis does is to reveal the reality to you that the borrowings and the rate of growth of GDP and other fundamentals do not lend to debt sustainability. And let me also put this across that Ghana officially entered high-risk debt distress category in 2014. Okay? So, but after the 16th IMF program, which kicked in from April 10, 2015 to April 2019, Ghana could not achieve debt sustainability under the 16th IMF program. So what has happened after that is that we have actually made the situation worse. Okay? And it's the first time, let's bear in mind, it's the first time Ghana is doing an aggressive debt restructuring of domestic debt the way we are doing. And that is a testament of the fact that we have not been prudent with our borrowing.
Okay,
and
so
also, roads.
So to put it in context,
let's look at it this way.
Yeah, I wanted to come back and come back to, because I'll give you the final word on this. To put it in context, what you're saying in essence is that if you take COVID and Ukraine, and you compare with the other West African countries, where they all suffered the two, you're saying that the distinguishing feature that determines which economy handled it better possibly came down to how they managed the economy. The question of mismanagement.
Precisely.
Okay.
And and you see resilience.
Okay.
The economies that were much more resilient were able to contain the pervasive impact of the pandemic.
Okay.
Compared to other countries. And that is why currently inflation in Cote d'Ivoire is less than 5%. It is not as though COVID made its headquarters in Ghana and actually bypassed Cote d'Ivoire. And you can check the figure, and you can also check Cote d'Ivoire's debt to GDP ratio and compare that to Ghana. Look, Ghana and Kenya, we can compare Ghana to Kenya in terms of structural peers. What Kenya did, because Kenya also has problem with debt situation. What Kenya did was that right after the COVID-19
pandemic
funding from the IMF, Ghana got $1 billion. Kenya immediately applied for an extended fund facility program, which Ghana didn't. And Ghana did it because we wanted to access funding from the Eurobond market, right? Now, that delay, if Ghana had applied for the IMF program in the third quarter of 2021, and we were actually hoping that the government was going to be a bit more proactive and use the 2022 budget that was presented in November 2021 to announce an IMF program. If we had done that, Evans, we wouldn't have been in this situation.
Yeah, Prof,
there would have
stay
been
with me.
minimal need
to do it. Stay with me, Prof. And I know the president today spent some time on the IMF thing. I'll wrap up with that. Yes, Doc. So that's the Prof's verdict on the issue.
I think it's appropriate you give me time to.
Please do it.
In the first place, I'm really surprised because anybody that tries to compare Ivory Coast and the French-speaking countries to Ghana, I'm shocked. They don't have the economic sovereignty. Let's go into it and check. They don't have something like Central Bank of Ghana that set up it, unless it's being done now, set up its own economic policies and spend this and do that and do ABC. They are controlled by Central Bank of France. So you cannot. Let's go and check this in clearly. That's why I'm saying that. It is not prudent comparing strictly one country to another because they have different dynamics. I am shocked when people do this. Maybe I don't understand.
So you've given us one dynamic.
I'm saying that.
One dynamic.
Do you
want to stress on which other
most
dynamics?
French countries, too, if they are not French-speaking countries, they have different outlays, expenditure needs. They roll out different programs. So it is wrong. It's not done anywhere. Somebody should prove to me that officially, let's get international professors on board and do this. Why sometimes do we do this for ourselves as a country?
We can solve this problem.
I'm coming, please. Let me finish.
Prof, I'll definitely come to you on this point. I just want to hear this point. I'll come to Prof.
Debt to GDP in Ghana in the year 2000 was over 130%. Go and check. So then let us stop.
But that's why I went to HIPIC.
I'm coming. Yes, I'm coming. But the situation why our debt to GDP went up greatly, if what I'm saying is wrong, Prof should tell me. What is debt to GDP? You accumulated debt over your GDP. When you have impaired productivity, the private sector had to cease. Things were importing, we're not doing the same. You go to the port, maybe 2 containers, 3 containers, they're all complaining. People were not going to work. Private sector were folding up because they were not even getting things they had to import. Prices and other things. Yet government had to spend. We even grew 0.4. But because we are falling short in terms of domestic revenue generation, government had no other option performing its obligation depending on debt financing. This, nobody can change it. If you can say anything on this earth, God is watching all of us.
But Doc,
let's face, I'm not saying it is, we are justified or somebody is justified.
So your,
but we have,
so your GDP has
when
been
people
impaired.
are talking, you are allowed.
No, but I asked them questions.
Can you allow me?
No, but I asked them questions.
So,
I mean, you can't say I can't ask the question when you're speaking.
I'm not saying you can't.
But so let me ask the question. You made the point about GDP being impaired. That's a fact.
So we
because
have,
of COVID.
So we have
to
make this clear to you.
Can I
no, let me sure that you ask that in the question.
No, it's important. You made a point already. You
haven't made my point.
But you made a point about the GDP being impaired.
In assessing people's performance, we have uncontrollable factors.
If the GDP,
you cannot do without that.
If your GDP is impaired, why do you then continue to expand your spending and your borrowing faster at the time when you know, true, your GDP is impaired?
What? No. Let me tell you.
But your GDP was impaired, and yet you were borrowing higher.
I'm coming.
And spending more.
I'm coming.
With a GDP that is in
if you look at how government finance its programs, there are 2 broad spending arms: revenue generation domestically, and then going for loans. So if domestically production and other things are being impaired, and you don't get the needed amount domestically you want to, you'll be forced to do more debt financing because you have obligations. Let me tell you, you have obligations. I'm not justifying, I'm not saying it's good, it's palatable. Something happens, you don't go to work. You're not getting the produce you're supposed to get from your farms. Your kids need school fees, they need water, they need medicine, they need that.
So you start
what do you do?
You start cutting your quota.
I'm coming. Oh, that is also one area.
Yeah.
But looking at the
But we did the opposite.
Evans, what you're doing to me is not fair. Because you let people talk.
But I asked questions.
But
I asked them questions. I asked
but you allow them to speak, explain for a long time, then you come in.
None of them
you're doing one-on-one with me.
I'm not. None of them when I
okay, can you finish your question? You allow me
I have
to
asked the question already. I'm saying that you did the opposite.
What is opposite?
Of
when you
notice a challenge.
Look, and this thing that we are talking about. What is thing that we are talking about? This thing we are talking about. How many countries debt to GDP do not go over 100? How many countries? How many countries? Talk about global. I don't believe in one country, another country, because they have different dynamics. What was the global debt to GDP that period, post-COVID? Let's ask ourselves, do you want to tell me that when this country, we are having deficit, at least he is saying even 7, even if it's 7, we had 5% for over 40 years. We hadn't had that for continuously for 3 years. This is a fact. You can go to the statutory organizations and check the results. Lending rate was reduced from almost 40% to about 20%. Policy rate, government-owned rate, 25.5 came down to about 12 point something. T-bills, when going up, means the economy is doing bad. The same period of about 20 to 23% came down to about 12%. And suddenly these 2 factors came. So why is it that people still want to push that out? What I understand, that maybe I agree, is that we are a country whose economy depends on other economies. So some of these issues critically affect us, and it gives us the severity of what is happening. That one I agree. Or we don't do things right, and it's cross-sectional. Our government, probably the way we manage some wastages and stuff like that, we don't do them, but I agree. Corruption, maybe I agree. A country that we don't produce, we import almost everything, I agree. And even if you talk of corruption, it's not just NDC and PP. Media, security, judiciary, MPP, NDC, even some traditional leaders, even now some religious leaders. So these are issues that if you complain, I agree. But the severity of what we are having today, with all the factors we are having, one cannot blame this government that, oh, you didn't do well. You can say partly some of the things that all governments do not do right, or this government doesn't do right. That one I agree.
So which one?
But
which one?
I mentioned corruption. It's an issue.
Okay. So
corruption
the government
is an issue in this country. What do you mean government is corrupt?
No, but
you have people who are corrupt in MPP.
Okay.
And you have people who are not corrupt. Just like the media. Some of the media guys are corrupt. Doesn't mean you are corrupt.
No, but I'm asking the question.
No. Let's also be real. Let's be very practical with issues. Is there any institution in Ghana here that we cannot find corruption in that? I mean, what I want us to do, and I want Prof respectfully to do, is that we are in it. What can we do so that going forward, when people finish school, they can get more jobs to do? That cheap things we cannot import. Let me come in.
That is our end.
Let me come in. Let me finish with this. This 1D, 1F. People should understand. MPP government is capitalistic in nature. We adopt expansionary fiscal policies by empowering private sector to expand and grow and employ people. Kasa Preku, maybe my brother, maybe because he's very intelligent, maybe for political sake or politics sake, he's saying that Kasa Preku does diversification into areas that are not even correlated or depends on his businesses. So go and check what Kasa Preku did. Whether it is the same thing he's doing, or maybe today Joy FM wants to do another business, but the name Joy FM is there, and government supported that thing and make sure that business did well. He said that you go and do road. You don't trivialize issues of this nature. By 2018, government, by the president, was stating 570 dams, 15 warehouses being built. You want to say the money, you got the money and put whatever in place. What are you talking about? When I was having my vetting, I brought about 16 different new items being done on TV because of 1D, 1F. So I am surprised. Nobody said the central government was going to build these companies because we support private sector doing that, and a lot of them have been completed, others ongoing under the NDC. What did they do about this sugar cane factory? They finished everything. They said that even raw materials that they need to feed the machines capacity, they did not have. That's what they're talking about. And say that any government will not put in place pro-poor policies when you economy. They are social democratic in nature. Tell me one pro-poor policy of national character they could do. Do you know why they could not do it? When it comes to roads, hospitals, and schools, the mostly MPP and DC they borrow. But when it comes to pro-poor, they cannot. Lastly, look at this. I have it here. Under Ghana Highway Authority, Department of Feeder Roads, Department of Urban Roads, comparison between 2009 and 2016, and then between 2017 and 2022. Under Ghana Highway, they had done 500 roads they've worked on, combined with new ones. The NDC government had done 581. We had done 1,505.72. They are there. You come to Department of Feeder Roads, they had done 1,613 or 13. We had done over 7,000. Department of Urban Roads, they had done 2,442. We had done 3,357. If you put them together, they had done 4,636. Nanado's government under his tenure, just that they had done 11,974.96 from Ministry of Roads. You can go and check tomorrow. And then you send your people to go and, in my constituency, in Shayasu, I'm ending with this, about 26 communities. Go and check. At least 70 to 80% of the communities, either the community roads entirely done or aggressively going on. Between Insawam and Apeja, go and check.
So stay with me.
So don't let us talk as if nothing is being done.
I just want you to note that all the time you've been speaking, Mr. Dongo hasn't said a word to interrupt you. So when he starts talking...
But when he's talking, you allow him more.
No.
But you don't even interrupt the way...
That's not true.
Thanks be to God, you listen to me.
I'm just making a note. I'm just making a note. So when he starts talking...
this statement?
You don't know because Mr. Dongo, I'll come to you.
So let's go and check the roads.
But because Prof wanted to respond to it briefly, I'll get Prof if we can deal with the subject you wanted to touch on when he made a point.
So everybody wants to deal with me.
No. I mean, the point. Prof is my guest. He's my neutral guest.
What I'm saying is that countries have different characteristics, but for performance, we have basis to compare. So the IMF has the World Bank has a framework. We have our regional peers, we have our structural peers,
Ask him that.
We even have our aspirational peers and our service superstar peers. So there are bases that we can compare and see relative differences in how one country is doing compared to the other. And it's the reason why the development of GDP and the rest of them, Evans, we all make references to them. Okay, because how one country grows, which sector is leading, and all of that.
They don't have the economic sovereignty.
But we are able to do those comparisons
please ask him this.
in a way that helps us. But Evans, I think all of these things, how does that help us? If you look at the domestic debt exchange that we have gone through, right, and the impact in the banking sector, financial sector, and the road ahead of us, I think we need to be humble. We need to identify with ordinary Ghanaians to the extent that we were asking pensioners to sacrifice their pension for Ghana to have a future. That's very serious.
Pensions are not part of it.
And then look at it this way, Evans. Over the years, we have seen positive GDP growth, but even that growth hasn't been sufficient. We have celebrated jobless growth, right? And even if you look at the growth from 2017, highly driven by hydrocarbon production, you can also check where the investments were made and all of that. But where we are and where we need to get to by 2040, Evans, there's a lot of work that we have to do. So I agree that, yes, corruption is cuts across political parties. Corruption is a reflection of our society. Today, leadership matters in dealing with this, right? Okay. Leadership matters, and we all need to come on board. But more importantly, Evans.
Yeah, Prof. Briefly, because I wanted to come back to, I wanted you to deal with that. I can come back to Mr. Adongo.
Yes. More importantly, if you look at the prior actions the IMF gave us, okay, we haven't seen something like that quite in recent time. It's because of where we find ourselves, right? And therefore, we are all expecting, given where our international reserves is, but what has helped us is that government has suspended coupon payment on the external debt and all of that. That frees up some reserves for us. But we need to have the program as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more that we need to do. But see the difference between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire is important. In April 2022, Cote d'Ivoire took a decision to reduce the number of ministers from 41 to 32. This is leadership. This has nothing to do with the fact that they don't have a central bank of their own. So countries take deliberate decisions based on their circumstances, okay, in a way that preserves stability.
Yeah,
that is very important.
And that difference is so key. I mean, Mr. Dongo, so he makes a point. The president says, well, to set us on the path of recovery, IMF end of March, we need to meet that deadline. He says he's very confident. China is cooperating now. Paris Club is cooperating now. We've finished the DD, the domestic debt exchange. External debt is going to be managed. And that the path to recovery is clear.
Evans, let us not pretend that we have the right to determine the foreign policy of any country whatsoever. That the Francophone countries are part of a union does not mean that they don't have their sovereignty. And you have to understand. I made that point.
Allow him to.
You have to understand. You have to understand that
you don't have central bank.
I deliberately.
But people are being misinformed.
No. You have to understand.
Evans.
You have to understand. You have to understand that the European Union is a decision by countries to form a union, and that monetary policy is controlled by the union, but fiscal policy must be complementary. Fiscal policy
this is different.
Is a decision of the government of the day, but that fiscal policy must be complementary to the union.
But you had made this point about the monetary policy.
I am making the point that that is a foreign policy decision.
Yeah, but that influences.
But then, if
a significant difference between us and
if there are positives, why don't you implement them? If by being part of that union, your government cannot print 90 billion and give to your government, is that not a good example? But I want to make the point that before COVID, in 2019, we were spending 91% of our total revenue and grants to service debts. That was not COVID. That was not Russia-Ukraine war. And you had only 5%, and it comes down to the buffers and the resilience that Prof was saying. So when you are spending 91% of your total revenue and grants to service your debt, you lose fiscal resilience and you lose fiscal buffers.
That is not true.
So you now have just 9%.
The percentage you
now have 9%. You now have 9%.
It's not
you
true.
now have 9% to deal with the rest. Evans, the IMF own Article 4 review of 2021 dealing with 2020. indicated that in 2020, we spent 129% of our total revenue and grants just to service debts. What it means is that all our total revenue and grants, including all the free monies that we were given and the loans that we borrowed, all that we did was to service debt and borrow more to service debt. So we ran a primary balance of about 11%. This is not something that you can continue. And I'm saying that the reality of the economy, by 2019, we were already printing money from the Bank of Ghana. We had abandoned the zero financing of the budget as enshrined in the memorandum of understanding we signed as a government as part of the ECF to exit the ECF. We had abandoned it in 2019. At that time, COVID was not around. Okay? By 2019, the IMF own report, when we went going to look for the rapid credit facility, were indicating that we're doing deficit in excess of 7.7%.
But the same IMF boss had stated categorically twice
The IMF boss.
that Ghana's problem is down to COVID and Ukraine. In fact, it says before COVID and Ukraine, Ghana was doing well.
I'm just painting the picture of the IMF. It's not my data.
Yeah, but that same IMF boss,
And I'm
very recent.
explaining to you, IMF has a responsibility to manage Ghana's situation when we came to them in order not to exacerbate the fear of the international community.
The IMF is
They were just being
manipulating
diplomatic with our situation. But the data they themselves have.
But
am I the one?
I'm curious.
No, am I the one?
But you trust the IMF pre-COVID numbers, but not the IMF
I'm
post-COVID
explaining to you.
explanation.
I'm explaining to you that I'm not the one who said we're spending 129% of our total revenue on debt service. It was the IMF that said that. Are you getting the point? Does that suggest to you that we're in good hands? I'm not the one who said that as at 2017, 2018, 2019, we were doing deficit of 7.7%. The IMF said that when we went to them looking for a rapid credit facility. I'm not the one who said that we were doing primary balance negative of 4.7%. As a matter of fact, I'm not the one who said that at the time COVID arrived, we had zero buffers to deal with COVID. I'm not the one who said that.
Yeah,
IMF said that.
Yeah, but that's the IMF.
It doesn't matter. So I'm giving you the numbers.
That is not true.
I'm giving you their own data for you to draw a conclusion as to whether on the face of this, the IMF is speaking the truth or the IMF is now disowning its own data. Okay? I'm not the one saying it. These are data from the IMF. That the IMF itself had cause to say that because we were over-scrutirizing and because we are hiding a lot of debt in pockets of special purpose vehicles, our debt to GDP.
IMF never said that.
No.
Please.
No,
that we're hiding debt in.
Not in those exact words. But the reason why.
So correct him.
Wait.
Why is he deceiving the public?
Wait, let's clarify this. Not in those exact words, but the reason
But in which words?
No, the reason why the IMF did a dose-economic analysis and included all of Ghana's debt. In fact, the finance minister himself, for many years, I was saying our debt rate was around 79%. Recently, in his budget, I'm coming just for my public, he had himself now said we are over 100. Which tells you that before the IMF came in, this is important, some of the debt of have not been factored in. No,
it's not
have not been
starting.
factored in. So that is a fact.
It's not starting.
No, please wrap it up for me.
Spending and revenue generation, the growth.
Some things are factual.
Progressive. They
Evans,
go
some
on.
things are factual.
No, that's not true.
This is intentional.
So what?
No, wait.
Everything he says is not true. It's not true.
Were we not told in this country
How?
that Dachi, which was borrowing 1.5 billion for Get Fund, was not part of public debt? Are we not restructuring Dachi's bond? Is that our bonds?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm asking a very simple question. If it wasn't our debt and it was not sitting on our public debt, what is our business restructuring somebody's debt?
Government had interpreted the debt stock differently from what the IMF.
It is not the case. I am saying that the reality is that we're hiding $1.5 billion in pockets of.
Those are your words.
That's my words. Yeah, those are my words. But that's the reflection. We said that ESLA debt was not part of government of Ghana debt. Why are we restructuring Dachi? We said Sino Hydro was better and was not part of our debt.
It's not been part of the.
Why are we begging China to
I have a minute wrapper. Let me ask
So
you.
the point is that we were hiding pockets.
No, but you
We were hiding pockets of debt and interest payment in funny places.
But the interest payment
And now
was wrong.
And now the truth is being laid bare. Now you are busy restructuring some people's debt. How is that possible?
Quickly, but the path to recovery, IMF, end of March, it's realistic.
Evans, you let me speak.
No, give me a second.
End of March.
Yeah, that's the path to recovery.
When China, our biggest creditor, bilateral creditor, is saying that they are still celebrating Christmas on after March, and you cannot go there without them.
They've sent their men, Exim Bank, to come and negotiate already, which is a show of
I'm
trust.
explaining to you that knowing the game plan of China. You see, China believes that no country, no sovereign can be broke. I mean, a sovereign can be broke, but a sovereign can never be poor. And that there are always ways by which you can pay if you are quizzed. And they will make sure that you are so desperate, your economy is in tatters, that you accept any conditions. Okay. Let us not treat China
Evans,
like
let me correct this.
Just a minute.
No.
Strictly.
Interest payment as a percentage of our revenue is never 91. Even 2020 was higher than 2019, and that was 44.61. How can you come and lie like that?
Okay.
Yes.
Go and read the article.
Any World Bank report.
Which World Bank? Read article 4.
No, World Bank report. This is it.
Go and
read. Interest payment. Listen.
Which date?
Interest.
What date?
Oh, what is date? World Bank report.
Which date? It can be any time.
2023.
I'm talking 2020.
So read it.
2020. I don't
Yes, but the 2020 is 44.61.
How?
Ghana interest payments.
And you read it.
Economic, but this doesn't say it's from the World Bank.
How? Read it. Just read it. It's not World Bank. No, read this. It's not World Bank.
Ghana was reported at 44.61% in 2020, according to the World Bank.
Thank you.
Collection of development.
Thank you. Say you're in trouble.
Official
Don't come and lie to people like that.
Read article
You are in
4,
trouble. You see what you've done.
30-31.
Just apologize.
No.
Just apologize.
You are not serious.
Because you can't
You are not
deceive
serious.
Ghanaians.
Where is that
Just
document from?
apologize.
Go and read article 4.
Just apologize.
Go and read article 4. How? How can I read? How can you not be putting data?
No, but
read article 4.
But don't say
Paragraph 30-31.
No. I mean, both of you, as I sit here, I'm not able to validate any of the things.
Read article 4.
Like an interest payment.
Paragraph 30-31. Listen, go and read.
You don't even understand
It's 129%.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Say I'm sorry.
This
Prof, I'm grateful that you joined me.
You've mismanaged this economy. 29%. How can that be?
Just say sorry.
No.